Hello and welcome to the Keto Man's Club podcast.
We're glad you're here, where each week we talk about men's health and lifestyle.
We do so with the foundation of the ketogenic diet and lifestyle.
If you don't know what keto is, stick around and you'll find out.
The podcast will bring you real, honest fun.
Each week we strive to uncover the tips and tricks that you can use in your everyday life to maximize your overall health.
Find the clearest path to becoming the best version of yourself that you were meant to be.
Eat meat, lift heavy, sleep, and repeat. We call that our life cycle. Made a shirt about it, and it rings true with who we are as a podcast and a group. We are fortunate enough to have partnered with a company who can help us achieve one of those three key elements: Som Sleep. They have a keto-friendly version of their delicious sleep aid drink, and we're loving it. It's a lightly flavored 8-ounce anti-energy drink. You drink it roughly 30 minutes before you're ready to go to sleep, and you'll feel it help you into a deep, restful, all-night sleep. It provides some helpful elements to do so, including magnesium, GABA, and melatonin. When combined, you have a powerful tool for getting the impactful sleep that you and I so frequently don't get in our technology-driven, fast-paced lives. You can find it at some retail stores, but you can also purchase it online and get it shipped to your door. When you do, use discount code TKMC10 and you'll not only be getting 10% off, but you'll be helping support the Keto Man's Club. You can find the link to their website by going to theketomansclub.com. We're thankful to Som for partnering with us, and we hope you'll benefit from the use of their product the way we have so far. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Keto Man's Club podcast. My name is Chris. I'm one of your hosts, and as always, I'm joined this week by Jim and Alberto. How's it going, Jim?
It's all good, man. We're starting into month number 2 of 2021, and Groundhog Day is right around the corner. Judging by the weather, we're going to see 463 more weeks of snow and bitterness in the world. No, I'm just kidding. It's all good. How are you, sir?
Doing well, keeping very busy, but maybe starting to get a little bit ahead of the curve, which would be a great thing right about now. So, yeah. So, Alberto, what's going on with you?
Oh, same old, man. Just another week. Crazy busy week last week at work, and so kind of really needed this weekend to kind of catch up and relax, and we'll do it all again starting tomorrow. So.
Do we have to? Do we have to do it again tomorrow?
Yeah,
I would prefer not.
I
do like that paycheck though.
Yeah, I start my new schedule. I started my new schedule yesterday, working Saturdays for the first time in 6 months, which is no fun. And then I'm working Mondays again, and that's okay. But I was using Monday as my day to prepare for multiple podcasts to land on Tuesday. And so I've been trying to work all week to get ahead and make it so that I can get these edits done as quickly and as efficiently as possible so that they land on Tuesday without issues. So we shall see how that ends up playing out. Hopefully it will be good to go and not be an issue. So, yeah. So let's talk club news. Just a reminder to our listeners. We want to make sure that our listeners go to our website, theketomansclub.com, and you can access all of our social links. All of our, pretty much everything is there, including our partner Som and all of the other brands that we love to support because they are great people. You can also email us at ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call or text 512-518-6161. So there's lots of ways to connect with us. We would also ask that if you would, that you take the time to visit Apple Podcasts or Amazon and review the podcast, because that helps put us in front of as many people as possible. And the more we can get in front of folks, the more lives we can see changed. And that's what we're all about around here. So your help with that is much appreciated. Let's go straight into picks of the week. Let's start with Jim.
Well, you would do that just as I had moved through mine here. So, but I know who it is, and it's a pretty good one, I think. I'm giving a shout out to our man Alberto here, because he put up some honest stuff over the last couple of days, and greatly appreciate it. We talk about how great keto is and everything, but sometimes there's a little hiccup in the road. There's some challenges and whatnot, and you just have to ride it out and everything. So to my brother from another mother, all the love, Mr. Berto.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, that was a great post for sure, and a lot of transparency there. But that's so important as men. We oftentimes think we can't show vulnerability in who we are and on all of that type of thing. And when we break down that wall, when we challenge that internal belief, it ends up being a good thing for sure. So thanks, Berto, for being transparent there for a minute. Who's your pick? Go for it.
Well, how do you follow that up?
That's why I went first this time.
Actually, my pick, the main group, our buddy Bob Hunt Jr. is back, posting pictures of all of his ridiculous amount of food and food preparation. And every time I see those, it's like, makes me realize how lazy I am when it comes to my cooking.
Yeah,
well, all those great food ideas. We'll talk about how food affects us here in a bit. That's what today is all about. So I'm looking forward to discussing my glucose readings. Hint, hint, and chuckle, because some of them weren't that lovely, and other times they were great. I know what works. We can say that confidently. My pick for the week is going to be Joe Malushi. He posted on the 25th, and he said he's finally done procrastinating putting this post together. I started keto sometime before the picture on the left. I was 395 pounds then. After a few years of excuses, this picture was taken, and I had enough. In November of 2017, the picture on the left was taken, and I was 375 pounds. Not much tracking, just eating intuitively. The picture on the right was taken January 25th, 2021, the day before my 36th birthday. I am 244 pounds. I'm ready to take the next step. I'm started tracking my macros and need to break a few bad habits. I also need to start working out. And this is the type of transformation that we very fortunately get to see on a very regular basis. People, men specifically, taking charge of their life, losing, let's see, what is this? 395, almost 150 pounds, slow but sure, basically over the years, which I was just talking with someone earlier today. Slow but sure is the best way to do it, because it ends up staying off most of the time, because it's the sign that you made a lifestyle change and not just hey, I'm going to go to diet for a little while. So I love to see that. Excellent work there, Joe. Awesome job. So that's my pick. Let's see. Is there any other business that we should attend to before we dive into our conversation?
We had 20 some new members join the Keto Men's 101, or excuse me, the Keto 101 Men's Club last week. And I think we're on target for another 20 or so this coming week. So again, those who are at the first of the year and looking for health opportunities and just all kinds of stuff, or just looking for a group for men to kind of share, commiserate, laugh, be honest, welcome aboard. Glad to have you. A lot of people are finding us through the podcast. A lot of folks are finding us through Reddit. Again, I'm not really a Reddit user, but there's a lot of people out there who are subreddits, and I don't even know the terminology, so I'm not even going to try it. But hey, grateful for all of you that are tracking us down.
Absolutely. Yeah. However they get to us, we'll take them, as long as they answer the questions. Answer the questions.
That's it. And I know I brought it up last week, and we were at like 49.8 or something like that. But as of right this moment, we're at 50,713 downloads on the podcast.
That's pretty darn good. This will be this episode that we're airing right now. Let's check the spreadsheet here. This is going to be 91. So
oh my gosh!
90
episodes.
Planning
for 100? Wow.
Yeah, in less than 90. In less than 90 episodes, we've got 50,000 downloads. That's
90s
phenomenal.
was a good decade.
90s
things were simpler.
Yep. A lot less hair gel. Yeah.
Couldn't track your glucose though. Couldn't do it.
Sorry, that just hit me the right way.
Okay, yeah, me too. Of course, I was taking a drink just off the side when that happened. Okay, well, yeah, awesome things with the downloads. I'm glad that we're seeing those numbers continue to increase. The group, we've not seen, huge strides as far as the numbers of new group members, but we're still seeing steady growth in both groups, and even beyond that, we're seeing growth in the members. The members themselves are showing maturity and growth. And there's quite a few of our one-on-one members that totally shouldn't be at least just in the one-on-one group at this point. They totally need to be over in the main group. And we probably need to do a better job of saying, hey, you're ready. Come on over. So that will be that's so great. Okay. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, and then introduce our guest a little bit. And I didn't get her full bio, so I'm gonna leave it to her to introduce that. But we are joined by Carlee Hayes. She is with Nutrisense. I talked ad nauseum for 3 months as I wore my continuous glucose monitor over the holidays and during my first carnivore keto cut to monitor my glucose levels going up and down and seeing how I reacted to different things. That's how I have the data that I have, that for me personally, things like energy drinks don't have that much of effect on the in the moment type thing. I did see some we'll get into all the nerdiness in a bit, but basically that's how I got all of that information, and I loved every minute of it, versus having to use one of these once or twice a day and try to prick my finger and purchase all these little strip things. It monitors and it pulls every now and again. And so we're going to talk all about what continuous glucose monitoring is. We're going to talk about what it can tell us and all of that. Well, with that said, Carlee, welcome to the show. You're among a very limited few. We don't generally have females on the show because we're talking about men and men's life and men's health generally. But you have a unique perspective and absolutely have something that is important to share. And so we're glad to have you in the clubhouse. We took the Girls Not Allowed sign down for you.
I love it. I feel like we're on Little Rascals.
Yeah.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to talk about all things glucose today.
Absolutely. So introduce yourself a little bit on what your specific credentials are, what your background is, training, and what you do specifically for Nutrisense.
I'd love to. Great question. So yes, my name is Carlee Hayes. And as you guys know, I am a registered dietitian. So I'm the lead dietitian at Nutrisense. And as Chris knows, and hopefully Berto and Jim will find out, right, when you sign up for Nutrisense, is that we are a company that leverages technology from continuous glucose monitoring to just help people optimize their glucose metabolism, prevent disease, and just fine-tune their diets based on their individual biology. So that's what I'm doing now. I definitely didn't start there. So I went kind of a traditional background, had my internship at the Memphis VA. So I was kind of in the hospital system there. And then I really just wanted to work one-on-one with people to help them better their health. And I became an outpatient dietitian. So my first job, I was seeing, you name it, every single condition that you can think of. And it was usually a lot of, diabetes, pre-diabetes, but also, cardiovascular disease, gluten sensitivities, weight loss, all the typical things you think of when you think of a dietitian. I was seeing it all. So I kind of, dipped my toes into everything. But what I really started to see is that the people that were coming to see me were usually coming straight from their doctor's office with a diagnosis. And that was typically, probably about 90% of the time, either, type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. And they would come to me very motivated, right? Like ready to make this change. But what I started to get frustrated with was, why is it at this stage that we're making that adjustment? Why am I the last person? Why is health and nutrition the last kind of ditch effort to help these people live a healthier life? So I think there's a lot of reasons why that happens. But the big one is that there's a lack of focus on preventative health. We really are great at, addressing diseases once they arrive, but all of the stuff beforehand, we're kind of missing. We're missing all of those little yellow flags that say that maybe something might be starting to go wrong. And we're waiting for that condition to actually become a diagnosis before we're doing anything about it. So of course, my clients were feeling really frustrated and kind of disheartened that they didn't have that chance to make a change early on. And that's where I wanted to focus more on prevention and, addressing these things before they became that diagnosis.
Carlee,
So
what is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Really good question. So dietitians have to go through a minimum of 4 years. So a bachelor's degree, and then they have to do an accredited program, which is mine was about 9 months. And then they have to take a test and get certified, and they have to continue that education every 5 years to get recertified. So it's a degree, it's a supervised practice, a certification, a lot of schooling. Nutritionists, there are some really great nutritionists out there, but there's not as much regulation around what they need to become a nutritionist. So there's a lot of, online programs, and you can get it very quickly without that supervised practice to become a nutritionist. So my official title is a registered dietitian nutritionist to kind of try and eliminate some of that confusion, because we do a lot of the same things, but a dietitian typically just has a little bit more supervised training, and they have to go through this very regulated pathway to get where they are.
Great.
Good question.
So I'm curious, from what I have observed, you have a relatively small, tight-knit team at Nutrisense, but you guys, you're monitoring hundreds, if not thousands of group members, right?
Oh yeah. So we've grown very quickly. So we first started having users, seeing patients, if you want to call it that, back in September of 2019. So very, very quick rise. And I think we've grown very quickly in the past 6 months. So we started out with just five people. And we've recently kind of added more dietitians to our team, but we're still, very, very, very close knit, very small company. But we are probably the only people that have this unique insight into, everyone's glucose data without the presence of diabetes. So we're specifically looking at continuous glucose monitoring data from people that are trying to kind of focus on that preventative side of health. And I think that's really cool. It's really groundbreaking. There's not a ton of research in this space. So we've been able to kind of be on the forefront of managing glucose from this perspective.
Oh, that's great. So let's start from the very, very, very beginning. For our, we have people that listen to this podcast that are all walks of keto. So what is it exactly that your product does? Where do you put it? And just a really broad overview of what can you expect? What kind of data can you expect out of it as you start moving along with it?
That's a great question. So when we're talking about continuous glucose monitoring, or just glucose monitoring in general, I think everyone's first thought is, diabetes, right? So we probably all know someone that monitors their glucose from a finger prick device, a glucose meter. And Chris, I know you have one of those as well. But really what we know is that it's kind of cumbersome, right? So a glucose meter is going to give you one snapshot in time of what your glucose is doing. Whereas a glucose monitor, which is what nutrisense uses, it is a wearable device. So it kind of attaches to your skin. It looks kind of like a Band-Aid. It's inserted into your body. So it kind of stays there for a full 14 days to give you not just one, snapshot into time, but we like to think of it like a movie, like a time lapse of all of your glucose 24 hours a day for those 14 days. So instead of just, data points, you're getting tons and tons of data points every single day. So this really helps you see the full picture of what your glucose metabolism is doing, kind of like a window into your body to see what's going on and how your body's, coping with your diet or your stress or your sleep or what your exercise is doing to your glucose. Because when we think of glucose, the reason why it's so important to monitor is that we like to call it our other vital sign. So we monitor, blood pressure, we monitor our weight, we monitor our waist circumference, all these different variables, but we're not measuring the thing that can tell us the most about our metabolism, and that's glucose. So with glucose, our body really, really works hard to keep it in a very tightly controlled range. And we can kind of get into the specifics of the numbers or what to look for, but just knowing that our bodies work really hard to keep glucose in a tightly controlled range is important, because what we want to monitor glucose for is when it starts to go outside of that range. So like a little bit too high, maybe a little bit too low, or we're having bigger fluctuations within that range. That's the early signs of metabolic dysfunction, or, later on, insulin resistance. So by monitoring glucose and kind of making sure it's, in the optimal range most of the time, we're able to fine tune our habits, our lifestyle, our diet to keep glucose metabolism going the right way. There's been this statistic that everyone talks about that 88% of Americans are not metabolically healthy. And it's true, right? So it might be glucose, it might be other signs of metabolic dysfunction, but by using that continuous glucose monitor, we're able to see what's going on and make changes early on to prevent issues down the road. And so nutrisense uses those, but we also, for me, I'm a dietitian with nutrisense, so I am assigned to, different users that are trying to observe their glucose for different reasons, and I'm helping them identify those trends, become their own glucose expert, and then make changes where they need to optimize that data and get their glucose where it needs to be.
So with this monitoring program and wearing it for 14 days, what's the responsibility of the individual? Are they tracking, woke up at 6 a.m., breakfast was eggs at 9, all that kind of stuff? Or what all does the individual have to do to help give you the full picture?
Right. So definitely tracking is optional, but I would say it helps you, paint the better picture, because over time you're not going to remember what you had on a certain day, or, why your glucose spiked from this one thing. So definitely monitoring and tracking your macros. You don't have to track the specific macros, but just typing in a short description of your meal is really helpful, because that can give you really comprehensive analytics of how your body responded to that meal. And then me, your dietitian, can come in and say, hey, this was a little bit too high. Let's try changing this one thing. Or, hey, let's try moving this at a different time of the day to optimize your response. So definitely meals is probably the most important thing. Our app does connect with, Health Kit from Apple or Google Fit. So some of that data is already coming in. Like if you're wearing an Oura ring, or, some of your exercise from Health Kit will automatically populate, or you can add it in yourself just to see how your glucose is responding to that as well. And then we always want to monitor sleep, both your quality and your quantity, and then stress. So we have the ability just to, on a 1 to 5 scale, rank how stressed you are throughout that day, because it has a huge impact on your glucose. So the more the user logs and monitors, the more insight they're going to get in their glucose, for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the days just kind of at random from December, and I've got all sorts of data points. And because I track my sleep using my Apple Watch, because I have workouts that sync up with the activity app and everything else, it's all right here. Plus I added the points of I had this or I had that. And as far as food goes, and I can see that half an hour later, 45 minutes later, here's whatever the response was for that. And so it's really great to be able to see this correlation, and it is a slight time delay, but that's how our body works, number one. And that's two, it takes time for the glucose to actually make it to where the sensor's actually pulling the fluid from our bodies. So it's
right. That's a really good point. So when you think about glucose meters, they're measuring your blood, right? The CGM, the glucose monitor, it measures your interstitial fluid. So this is that area right outside your cells. And when we think about how glucose travels through your body, it's first going to go into your blood, and then it's going to travel into that interstitial fluid. So, Chris, you're exactly right. There is that lag time, right? It's a little bit delayed behind your blood glucose. So if you're measuring at the same time as your glucose meter, they're probably not going to match up, right away. But about 15 to 45 minutes later, you'll see that same value. So, and then, by looking at that data, you can see your full response to that meal that you just ate or exercise or whatever it is, as long as you're scanning at least once every 8 hours.
Yep. Let's talk about the big question that I'm sure that you're tired of answering at this point. Does it hurt? Because you're inserting this filament into your skin, and you're like, there's a needle. What, it's got to hurt, right? And I know that it doesn't, but what do you tell the clients as they're apprehensive about all that?
Oh, 100%. I would say this is the biggest question I get. And I'll tell you, I was apprehensive the first time I applied one as well, because you look at the needle and it looks large. But a good thing to know is that needle does not stay in your body. what it does is it inserts just a tiny little microfilament that sticks in that interstitial fluid. And most people that are afraid are like, when they push that CGM in with the applicator, there's a sound. And I think that sound is more frightening than anything else. And then that's the only way that they know that it's been inserted, because usually you don't feel it. It feels a lot less painful than even a finger prick or a shot.
Yeah.
So definitely not a painful thing. I would much rather do this than prick my finger any day.
Yeah. When I do my Keto Mojo thing, I still have to do the breathe, punch. You know, it's a mental thing. Like, you know, I have to do the same thing with my TRT shots, but that's a much larger, much longer needle, that I'm putting much deeper into my legs. So yeah, it's one of those things that, it wasn't nothing. I still had to like sit there and go, okay, let's do, but as far as actual experience of it, nowhere close to the discomfort that I take from a finger prick or from an injection. It's nothing like that. So it really was, and it's spring loaded, and that's the noise that you're talking about. And that is that the whole unit, you kind of connect these two parts together. And I wish I still had them. I would show them.
Oh, I have them.
Oh, very cool.
I have them here. So I haven't opened this yet because this is still the one that I'm going to apply, but it comes with a couple different things. So it comes with the sensor, which is right here. And then this is the applicator. So this is where the needle is. But again, this doesn't stick in your body, only that tiny little microfilament. But yeah, it is scary because you see the needle before you put it in. But as long as you're putting it in kind of that fattiest portion of the back of your arm, it really doesn't hurt. That's the biggest thing that I hear all the time is how surprised people are when it doesn't feel painful.
Yeah. And so that insertion one, it's just a spring loaded thing that puts it on there. And then the glue or the sticky backing sticks on the skin. It blocks out water. My last few sensors, I didn't even use the Band-Aid over it to hold it in place. It was good enough by itself without any issues. So, I was having a little skin reaction to the bandage. So I didn't have the same reaction to the glue though, so that's good.
And that's what I will say is use the adhesive wipe if you can. You can wipe that on, then it'll just add the extra layer of stickiness. Yeah. I don't like the Band-Aids either, but we do have a lot of people that have them fall off, especially if they're really active without the Band-Aids. So if you don't want to use that adhesive wipe can be a good sub.
Very cool. So let's see here. We've talked about what it is and how it works in general. We've talked about that it provides the glucose data, the numbers of that. Let's talk about what the normal ranges for those are for a healthy individual, and then what you normally see in someone that's diabetic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes. So when we're talking about glucose and kind of what to look for, there are three main kind of things that we're looking at. And the first is one that if you've ever got a standard lab panel from your doctor, you probably are familiar with, and that's your fasting glucose. So that's just as it sounds, right? You're fasted for at least 8 hours, and that's when you're drawing your glucose. And so what we're looking for there for optimal metrics is a fasting value between 70 to 90. And the interesting thing is if you go to your doctor and you get this lab drawn, a lot of the times you're not going to get any red flag or any, sign that this might not be normal until you're exceeding 100. So they're kind of looking for fasting glucose to exceed that 100 before they flag it as being something you need to pay attention to. But for optimization, for longevity, to just optimize our health, we're looking for that fasting value between 70 and 90. And that's, just one of the metrics, but it is a really important one to look at. And with the CGM, you're able to see all the different factors that can influence that value. So Chris, I know you noticed, how sleep impacted your glucose. I know you mentioned one night that your dog, right, kind of woke you up in the middle of the night. And so your fasting values were just slightly higher that following day. Mm-hmm. And that's the really, really interesting thing about fasting glucose is how affected it is by small little changes in our lifestyle. So alcohol the night before can cause really high fasting values the next day. Poor sleep, waking up in the middle of the night, or just kind of being stressed throughout your day can cause that slightly higher fasting value. So if you think about going to your doctor's office, right, you're just getting that one metric. Sometimes you'll get a hemoglobin A1C, which is kind of an average glucose value of your glucose over 3 months. But those are usually the only two metrics that you're getting. And with that fasting value, say you have a really bad night of sleep the night before, that might not be an indicative of your overall fasting values, which is why the CGM can be so helpful to see kind of over a longer period of time what those are trending. And so when we start to see values kind of creep up above 90, that's when we start to pay attention more to that fasting glucose. So a lot of times we'll have people that will, check their glucose every year at the doctor like they're supposed to, and it's slowly creeping up. Maybe it started at 80 and then now they're at 92, 93. That's when we really want to make those changes to get fasting glucose below that 90 for optimal values. So that's just one metric. There's a couple different ones that we're looking for. I know one thing you had mentioned was, when we do eat, what are we looking for? And that one is a little bit more nuanced because there are a lot of different things that we're looking at. So when we eat a meal, we are looking for, first of all, the peak glucose value. So first of all, how high your glucose is getting after that meal, that maximum value. And in that case, we want to most often aim for values less than 140. I know, Chris, you had yours kind of set as a tighter value, like a 120 as your threshold. Is that right?
I was, but that was intentional because one, I was carnivore for the majority of that time, so I knew that it shouldn't spike above that, and if it did, then something was in whatever it was that I was eating, and I wanted that signal. But yeah, I had moved mine from 140 to 120 just because I wanted a tighter factor there.
Yeah, and we typically see, with people on a keto diet, carnivore diet, they're usually staying below that 120 unless, they're maybe trying like a keto product and it has some isolated fiber or an artificial sweetener that their body's reacting to, and that will shoot them a little bit higher. So definitely we do see kind of that tighter threshold in a keto diet. But for people, consuming a mixed macronutrient diet, ideally we want that peak value less than 140. And the interesting thing about this is that there's really no governing body that's assessing this metric at all. So the American Diabetes Association, the WHO, they're not really looking at that peak value at all. But we know from research that it's a really important metric to monitor. And really with this, we're not concerned about the occasional spike above 140. If you have a meal that's a little bit off and you're spiking a little bit higher than that on occasion, probably not a concern. But really it's about that repetition. So if you're spending a large portion of your time above 140, every single meal, then that can be detrimental to your overall health. And what we see with these high spikes above 140, especially above 160 to 180, we start to see, damage to those beta cells. We see oxidative damage because it's causing that damage on the blood vessel itself. So repetition above that 140 can be really toxic to the system and can lead to problems later on. So again, identifying foods that are causing you to exceed that value and identifying those and kind of making changes to that can make a huge difference in your metabolic health. And that's just the peak value.
So Berto spoke last week or the week before, I forget which, about his daughter's doing Girl Scout cookies. So let's say Berto decides, I'm over it. I'm over it. And he just knocks back 3 boxes, just, like that kind of thing. Because he's going to do it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. But I mean, what would be a typical response like for something like that? Because I'm trying to figure out, if somebody goes and has a cupcake at their kid's birthday party, is that going to knock it up to 300, or are we going to stay around 110 for an hour, or how does that work exactly?
Well, it really depends on the person, and it depends on what diet they're following. So, Berto, if you're following a keto diet, you might have a very big response to this food, especially if it's not something that's in your normal diet. But we can get into that and kind of the nuances within that as well. But if that's not something that you're eating a lot, you're eating 20 net carbs a day, that one 50-gram carb cupcake will cause a very, very high response. It's really likely that it will take you above that 140. I think an important thing to note here is that it is quite normal to spike above 140, and that doesn't always mean that you have insulin resistance or, something's going on. There are foods that inherently always take us above 140. For me, that's chocolate covered pretzels. No matter what I do, I will spike above 140 to that food. And again, that's the standard American diet, right? That's, sugar and really, really refined carbs that are designed to affect our glucose really, really quickly and be absorbed into the bloodstream rapidly. So it doesn't always mean that you have some metabolic dysfunction if you're spiking above those, but it is a sign that maybe those foods aren't supposed to be in our diet a lot. really we're concerned if you're spiking above 160 to 180 and you're staying there for a while. That's where we start to see the most damage, especially in the research that we've seen so far. So again, spiking above 140, it happens on occasion. We can usually make some tweaks to get you below. But when we do that all the time, we're spending repeated excursions above that range. That's when we start to get concerned. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
I can tell you for a fact the whatever the carb substitute is in Quest bars, my body totally thinks it's refined sugar. And then my body reacts to refined flours even worse than sugars, like way worse. I'm looking at a 180 here because of pizza, pizza. So, hey, it was Christmas Day. You do what you have to on Christmas Day. But yeah, it's interesting to me that actually my response to non-sweet, savory, and whole grain, or whatever you want to call it, is actually worse, and it's longer. It takes longer, and I think we talked about that, me and I'm totally blanking on her name.
Molly.
Molly. We were working on we were talking about that, and she said, "Yeah, that's normal, because it just takes longer to go through the system, right?"
Yeah, so if you think about a food like pizza, that's a lot of starch, right? It's a lot of refined flour, like you mentioned. And I like to think of that as an acellular carbohydrate. And that's a big fancy word for it's been broken down, so it doesn't have cell walls, so our body doesn't have to work very hard to break it down. It goes right to the bloodstream, right? So that's where you see that high spike. But then with pizza, you're adding, fat from the pepperoni and the sausage, and you're adding fat from the cheese. And what fat does, as you guys probably know, is it slows digestion. So instead of having, one big spike and then you're coming back down, you're going to see smaller, more frequent spikes because that fat is slowing down digestion, and then that glucose is being released in bouts afterwards. So we call that a large area under the curve, right? Because you're having that large spike, but it's continuing and it's not coming down quickly. Versus if you just ate a soda, right, or you drank a soda, that's quick acting carbs, but there's no fat to slow it down. So it rises quickly, and then ideally it's going to come down pretty quickly. And with those small spikes that I talked about, that's a normal response to that food. So Molly's right. That's what our body's supposed to do. We have a couple different phases of insulin. So we have that first phase, and that happens, 15 minutes after the meal. And then every, 15 to 30 minutes afterwards, we have another phase of insulin. And that's going to keep happening until it brings glucose back down. So for meals that are that really fun combination of both starch and fat, that could take a very long time to get back down to glucose values. That's a good point.
What about other chemicals in the body? I mean, are there things besides glucose that you have to monitor with all of this that, I'm sure you're looking at medicines that somebody takes and things like that, but just what are some other things that can impact your glucose numbers on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, that's a
besides
great
the
question.
Food, I should say.
So yeah, we always say there's 4 different pillars, and you had mentioned, medications. That's definitely one of them. So there are medications that affect glucose. There are supplements that can falsely affect glucose. So like if you take a really high dose of vitamin C, that can falsely affect your glucose in the CGM specifically, just due to a reaction with the sensor itself. But when we're talking about the major glucose influencers, aside from food, that's going to be exercise, stress, and sleep. And I like to think of those as like the 4 pillars, because if you think of them holding up that table, and that table is our metabolic health, just one of those falling apart can cause the whole thing to crumble down. So I think a big one that we see is stress. When we have stress, our body is experiencing a big load of cortisol. That's our stress hormone, right? And what cortisol does is it tells our body, hey, we are under a threat. You need to give us some energy in case we need to run for the hills, right? So in our olden days, we might be actually running from something, trying to save our lives, and we might actually need more fuel to power that movement. So what the body does, and this is smart, right? It increases our glucose output from the liver. So cortisol is like, hey, give us some more glucose so that we have some fuel to move if we need to. And then at the same time, it's reducing our insulin sensitivity so that more of that glucose, right? Think of glucose as energy, is staying in that blood so that we have it to use in case we need to run from a lion or whatever it is. So now we have all these stressors that are chronic, but we don't need to necessarily run from, right? We have bills, we have a pandemic, we have all these things that are adding up and causing this cortisol response, but that's just causing our glucose to stay high consistently, and we're not running from that stressor. So that is probably the biggest one that I see in people's data now. Chris, I think you even saw this from something with work. You had an interview or you had a stressful conversation and you saw your glucose increase just, minimally, but you still saw that increase in the absence of food.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't remember what the situation was. It doesn't matter now, but yeah, there was definitely a response there that was tracked in that moment, and it is being a data nerd like I am. I loved seeing that. I hated having the stressful moment. Whatever, it's normal.
Right. Yeah. And I think sleep is kind of perceived by the body as the same way, right? So if we have even one night of fragmented sleep, so your dog's waking you up, or a couple nights of inadequate sleep, so you're, maybe working late and you're only getting 4 hours, the body perceives that as a stressor. So it's going to reduce its insulin sensitivity, and we're going to have a higher baseline all day long. And we usually have higher responses to the same meals that we normally respond well to. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I don't know how many all-nighters I had on my readings. I'm pretty sure I had quite a few, though. I did a lot of all-nighters. That's been my MO lately. I'm trying to fix that.
Love it. Yeah.
How's that working out?
We'll see this week. This week's the week to force myself into a new schedule.
Yeah, this is the test.
All right, so again, taking it back just a little bit of a notch. Say someone is interested in a continuous glucose monitor. What steps do they take from knowing nothing about them to being set up and speaking to one of your staff? And it's like, how does that whole process kind of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do think, CGMs are becoming more popular. I think more people are knowing the benefits that come with CGMs. But I think the first step is to maybe listen to podcasts, kind of figure out if this is something that's right for you. My thought is anyone that wants to improve their health would benefit from a CGM. So the first step would be to find a program that can give it to you. Now with CGMs, they're typically only prescribed for people with diabetes, typically type 1 diabetes. So there is this real barrier in getting a CGM prescription. So in the United States, they are only allowed through a prescription. In other countries, they're available over the counter. So you can go to Canada and just go to your local pharmacy and say, I want a CGM, and they'll get one to you. And you can kind of track this stuff. But here, you kind of have to have someone that's prescribing that for you. And that's what nutrisense does. So we have providers on our staff that review really comprehensive health backgrounds to see if the CGM is right for you. And then we prescribe that, we get it to you, and then you're set up with someone like me that can help you interpret that data. So we find a lot of times with CGM data is that there's a learning curve in kind of understanding what's going on there. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of different metrics we're looking at. There's a lot of different responses, and there's a lot of different variability from person to person. So you might respond higher to a food that I respond really well to. And so it can be kind of confusing when you're getting into it, but that's where being with a professional that's trained in this data can help be the signal within the noise, so to speak. So we help you become your glucose expert. And so we're reaching out to you and monitoring your data really regularly and helping you identify those trends and reach your goals, whatever they might be. So I think right now, I do think that CGMs are going to eventually be available over the counter here, I hope. But until now, you have to kind of find a company that's willing to work with you if this is a preventative measure. So check out nutrisense. I think, like I said, I think that one-on-one communication from your dietitian can be really helpful, especially if you're hoping to make some big changes.
And how often do you communicate with your client?
Pretty regularly. So as Chris knows, you can message us right through the app. So there's an in-app chat, and we will respond typically within 24 hours on a weekday. But I'm usually responding or reaching out to my users as well. So if they're not reaching out to me, I'm still analyzing their data. And every time I see a trend, I'll reach out and kind of explain that to them, help them optimize it for the future. And another cool thing, if you're a data geek and you just love to experiment with your own data and your body, we can plan some N=1 glucose test to see how you respond to different changes in your diet or your lifestyle. So for biohackers, it's a really fun kind of communication that we have, because we can really do some fun experiments with their data.
One of those experiments that you guys did, I don't know who it was on the staff that did it. I don't remember, but somebody did a standing versus sitting experiment, right? Talked about that for a second.
Yes. Oh, that was an interesting one. So that was actually one of our dietitians. That was Bahar. We recently found a study in which replacing just 30 minutes of your day that you normally spend sitting with standing, so like at a standing desk or working from your counter or whatever it is, can drastically reduce your fasting glucose values. And so she didn't see any improvements in her fasting glucose because she only did it one day. But what she saw from the same meal is that sitting directly afterwards caused a giant spike in her glucose. And when she stood up, it didn't cause that same spike. So she was able to keep her glucose within the ideal threshold just from replacing 30 minutes after that meal, not with a walk, not with anything else, but just with standing at her standing desk, which was pretty cool. And that's a thing that we see all the time with, just movement in general. Chris, I noticed you mentioned this a lot as well, but moving after your meal. So if you go for even a 5 to 10 minute walk after your meal, that can drastically improve your response to that meal. Mm-hmm. Because when you think about our muscles, that's where we're storing a lot of our glucose. And so even small movements afterwards can help us dispose of, glucose that we had in our storage and help make room for glucose from that meal. So those are other cool experiments to do.
So we don't have to go straight to the gym and lift iron, to work off the glucose that we just ate.
No. I mean, I won't downplay the importance of strength training, because that's definitely one of the biggest things that we see make a positive impact. But even small movements. So I think we always think, I have to go for this 60-minute workout after I work out or after I eat, or else it doesn't matter. But even just, small little 5-minute movements after you eat can make that huge change.
What is the appropriate amount of time that somebody can eat to going to bed? Because we've had guys before that talk about, they work late or they go work out or whatever, and they don't get home till 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then they eat dinner late, and they're going to bed at 10:30, 11. So they've really kind of eaten their last meal within about an hour or two of going to bed.
Right.
I mean, and again, is that person to person how that impacts them, or what about that?
I would say there is some level of bio-individuality within that, but eating timing is probably one of the most universal rules that I see in all the users that I work with. And that's because when we think about the way that we respond to foods, our insulin sensitivity is really closely aligned to our circadian rhythm. So all that means is the closer you eat to, dark time hours or that middle of the night, the worse responses you're going to have from those foods. And I mean, there are some people that this doesn't matter as much to them, but for almost everyone, eating late at night will cause higher fasting glucose values overnight and also higher responses to that meal. So a good rule of thumb is trying to keep your meals about 3 hours before you go to bed. I know that's not ideal for everyone. If you're working late, there's only so much we can do. But if you are working late, sometimes people, see a lot of benefits from just having a lighter meal later in the night, or very low carb meals later in the night, or maybe just adding that postprandial, that after meal walk, to try and bring that glucose down a little bit. But if we can, trying to focus on that earlier eating window can make one of the most profound differences in your glucose values.
Prior to COVID, I was going to Orange Theory Fitness 5-6 days a week, and I've never been a morning person. So I would go after work, usually either the 5:30 class or 6:45, 7 o'clock. So, you do your hour workout kind of thing. Well, then getting home at 8, 7:30, something like that, then it's time to eat. So I've always kind of wondered, was I really doing any good? I mean, obviously I was burning calories and whatnot, and I wasn't coming home and knocking back 3 pizzas or anything, but yet am I doing this the right way, so to speak?
Right. I know. And I think for, people that are busy and have a hectic schedule, getting home late, that's often the biggest challenge. I know that was my biggest takeaway when I wore my CGM for the first time. When I grew up, we ate dinner at 9 o'clock every single night. That was just, we did. We were busy during the evening, and then we ate dinner and went to bed. And what I saw in my own glucose data was shocking, right? And I see that almost universally. So the closer we eat to laying down, being sedentary later in the evening, typically the worse response we're going to have to that meal. And that's where a lot of times people can improve their fasting glucose values by 5 to 15 points just from shifting their glucose or their last meal of the day, even 30 minutes earlier. Or like I said, like having it be a really small meal and having your lunch meal be the biggest. Sometimes that can be a workaround. But yeah, eating with the sun is a really, it sounds kind of woo woo, but it works. So it's interesting. One of the best experiments that we'll have people do is try the same exact meal at lunchtime and then have it at dinner time. And the responses are markedly different, with that mealtime at night being a much higher response. See, you got to get your CGM to test it out, Jim.
They've been closed for a few months, so yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I hear you.
So let's so we've talked about what signifies a healthy glucose response. We've also talked about what's out of range and whatnot. Now, in a diabetic person, are they normally going out into that 180 range just off of anything, or kind of what's by that point you've got this level of metabolic derangement that they're broken more or less. Let's be honest. So
right.
What are we seeing from that? But then through monitoring and through small changes, how quickly should we see a response to lowering or changing that physiological response?
So I definitely think, in people that have diabetes, there is some beta cell dysfunction there. So there's some definite changes that we can make, but they might have kind of a higher baseline, and that's just something that we have to battle. So a lot of times with people with diabetes, we'll set that upper threshold a little bit higher, and then we can work to kind of bring it down. So instead of aiming for postprandial values below 140, we might aim for 160 and kind of work to bring it down. And it's not to say that we can never improve that, because we definitely can. And we see this all the time. So we can work on improving our insulin sensitivity by, adding in strength training to help with our postprandial responses. We can alter the meal timing. We can kind of lower carbohydrate intake. And those are all things that we see make huge impacts in both your postprandial, your glycemic variability, which we didn't really get into, but is a really important metric. But it can take, a couple weeks to a couple months to see big changes, especially in fasting glucose, because we do see, so many variables there. So stress, sleep, all those different things. But if we're changing up your meal composition and your meal timing, we can see, improvements in your data in as little as a couple days to a week. If you do have more beta cell dysfunction, it can take a little bit more time. But I think there's this big thought that if you have diabetes or if you have prediabetes, all hope is lost. You just manage the condition. And I don't think that's the case at all. I've seen people make drastic improvements with the help of that real-time data. And it's awesome to see. So I think they do have power, and we can control this and bring this back into a much healthier range if we monitor it and know the right changes to make.
what have been the first things that people have experienced when they get their glucose back under control? Are there certain things that you're like, wow, I didn't even realize that was a struggle for me, and now it's back to normal kind of thing?
100%. The first thing that comes to my mind is energy. So that's probably one of the best short-term changes that I see people experience. And that's because your glucose fluctuations are very closely aligned with your energy levels throughout the day. So if you are eating foods that are causing massive spikes and then really big drops afterwards, so standard American diet, right? That's going to cause you to feel really kind of fluctuating energy levels throughout the day. So you might have a lot of energy when you're up high, and then you drop and you come down. But when we can really hone in and keep glucose in a much more tightly controlled range, so many people tell me that they have better energy, they sleep better, they don't have as much anxiety. I think that's not talked about enough. If you're having huge fluctuations in energy, that's causing those feelings of anxiety because your body's having to work really hard to kind of bring glucose back down to where it needs to be. So those are the two biggest things that I see, but improvements in energy and fullness and hunger cues is another big one as well. If you're on what we call the blood sugar roller coaster, right, where you're just you're getting up high and you're coming down low, and it's just this trend all day long, and you're chasing that glucose, bringing it back down can cause you to just have better control over your hunger. If you are, having these big fluctuations, your body's going to think that it needs food more often. But if we can get it down to, kind of a tightly controlled range, you might feel more satisfied throughout the day. And that's where people can see a lot of big improvements in their weight loss goals just from monitoring glucose.
That's
Mhm.
fascinating.
It's really cool.
This is a technology. It's just nuts. I like so this just popped into my head. But so say, how do I word this? Do you guys being the company, if someone was just making horrendous food decisions and horrendous diet decisions, and they hired you guys to help them fix it, do you offer meal plans, or do you just highly suggest they try to change a few things? Because there's got to be a certain percentage of people that they buy into it, they get their glucose monitor, but they don't change a thing, and probably just refuse to change anything and just kind of make your life a little more difficult. Have you had that happen? And what direction do you take there?
That's a really good question. I would say that has happened, but for the most part, our users are very, very motivated. And I think a lot of it is that real-time data. Chris can probably speak to this. When you're seeing that in real time, that's much more motivating than, say, you're on a weight loss plan and you're just waiting for that scale to come down in pounds, right? That takes time, that takes effort, and it doesn't feel like your efforts are being rewarded right away. Versus the CGM, that's right in your face all the time. You eat something that your glucose doesn't respond well to, you see it that hour, right? Yep. So that real-time feedback and kind of, it's that competition with yourself and seeing your choices in real time makes such a huge difference for how motivating it is for you. So that's where I say most of our users are really, really motivated because they're seeing the impact of every single decision as they make it. And we do provide meal plans for sure. If people are interested in that and want some meal ideas, we'll work with their diet preferences and kind of make some suggestions.
I can definitely say it's a game. How can I control this? How can I, it's just like, it's the exact same high that I get from playing a video game and winning or beating a boss, or like, yes, this day that's what data is to me as a data nerd. And so, that was absolutely what it was whenever I was doing whenever I had the sensor and like you said, Carlee, it was just in your face every 8 hours. I've got to scan anyway. So I've got to scan and then I've got to face, what did I do these last few hours? Did that cookie, did that pizza, what did it do? And sometimes I even was like, okay, I'm not even going to wait. Let's see what happens,
Yeah. And that's the cool thing too. You can scan as much as you want. So if you want to see every 15 minutes what your glucose is doing, you can scan and see it. So a lot of times when people eat a meal that's kind of off plan, they'll scan and see it every 15 minutes to see that glucose kind of climb up. So it's just motivating. It's in your face data. It's real time feedback. And I think that's crucial.
Do you find
one thing?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, you talked about, working with folks and the coverage and whatnot. Do you find that this is often covered under insurance? Is it not? What's your thoughts on that?
So it's not typically covered by insurance, but FSA plans. So if you have like a savings account with your insurance, a lot of times if you have a card, that will work for buying this program. And we can fill out kind of some forms to help support that for your insurance. It's not supported by insurance specifically, which hopefully, again, that will change in the future once everyone starts to see how beneficial this can be. Because if we can show the benefits of this and the improvements that can be made early on, I think insurance would greatly benefit from that. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. But one thing I wanted to touch on, you had mentioned the meal plans. And one thing I wanted to say, because we do work with a lot of keto users, we also work with a lot of carnivore users. We work with a lot of, vegan, all these different diets. So that's another thing that we really, really focus on, is that there's no one size fits all diet. And we're never going to prescribe a certain plan. We will look at your data and kind of tell you what kind of diet that's suggesting that might be best for you. But we don't prescribe anything. We're going to work with your preferences because we know, first of all, not everybody wants to follow the same thing. But also, we're going to follow what the data tells us. We always say data over dogma, right? Because the one size fits all, you follow this plan, you follow the same plan. I think those days are over because we know that everyone responds so differently to the same foods. So, and that can be fun to test.
Yep, definitely. So let's, we've still got a little bit more time, but we are starting to get towards the tail of our hour, and we want to respect your time as best as we can. What is the generic cost? I know if depending on the length of the term, it varies a little bit. But talk about some of the costs of what nutrisense costs and kind of response time, how soon you'd get the sensor and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, good question. So typically kind of how it works, you would go to our website, you click sign up, and then we have you fill out a health questionnaire. And that just kind of makes sure that we aren't giving you a CGM if it's not right for you. So right now we're not working with, pregnant women or anyone under the age of 18 or anyone that's on insulin currently. But other than that, if you fill out everything and you kind of fit the program, then you should be receiving a CGM kind of within that full week. And we have been experiencing some shipping delays with COVID, so that's kind of part of the course, but we ship it out to you pretty quickly and you can get started as soon as you receive it. And that would include the dietitian support as well. So again, becoming your own glucose expert. And there are a lot of different programs that we have. So I mentioned that each sensor lasts for about 14 days. So we have, if you just wanted to see how your diet's working or test some specific foods or whatever, just get a quick peek into how your metabolism is working, the trial plan is probably the best option. And that is about $175 right now. That is for the sensor, the app, the software analytics, and the dietitian support. And then we have longer programs. So we have like a month-to-month program where you can cancel at any time. And that includes those 2 sensors plus all of the dietitian support and analytics. And that one is $350 per month. And you can just cancel whenever you no longer want it. If you want a more of a subscription plan. So if you have maybe specific goals you want to set. So improving your fasting glucose or trying out the keto diet and seeing how that works for you, or maybe a weight loss goal that's specific to you. Sometimes that takes a little bit more time. So we have, 3-month plans, 6-month plans, and longer. Our most popular is the 3-month, and that would be $250 a month. That includes all those things that I mentioned, and then the dietitian for that first month, just to kind of help you identify everything that's going on and make changes where you need to make them. So we try and work with everyone kind of what they want to evaluate. Not everyone wants a CGM on them for 3 months. Maybe just 2 weeks or a month would be great for you, and that works.
Yeah, I'll definitely be spot checking here and there. At this point, I have 3 months of really great data. I'm already convinced that that pretty much from here on out, my way of life is pretty much 95% carnivore and about 5% keto, maybe 4% keto and 1% every now and again something else because, well,
pizza.
the wife's not keto. So
Makes it hard.
Yeah, it does make it a little hard sometimes. But it is one of those things that spot checking every now and again is really powerful once you kind of get some baseline. So for me personally, my recommendation that I would make to somebody who's trying to prove a plan, at least do a month, if not do a 3-month if you can. And then once you do that 3-month, you have enough data during that 3 months to really say, okay, I have this huge pool, 90 days worth of food that I know how I react to this, or at least how I reacted during this period of time. And then a few months down the line, get another sensor for a short period of time and have that just spot check. Hey, something's off. I'm not reaching my goal. What do I need to fine tune? Is something changed? Any of those things. And so that would be my personal thing. And because that's what I plan to do. I really feel like that's going to be a great way to go for a lot of our guys in the group and otherwise. So anyone that's seeing this, so yeah, very cool.
I would agree. That's a great option.
Yeah. So the website is nutrisense.io, correct?
Correct. And we are also on social as well. So if you have Instagram, Facebook, follow us at nutrisense.io. We're always trying to, post research or tips or, even if you're not using the CGM, you can at least do those things to improve your glucose where you can.
Yep. Very cool. Well, gents, did we miss anything else? We kind of, Carlee, we've got a chat behind the scenes that we kind of already asked that question, but maybe something came up. So.
Yeah, I just got a quick something that just came to me right this minute. So is there a correlation between like being able to track your blood glucose and say food allergies? Like for instance, I eat 100% strict keto, but I didn't realize I was allergic to eggs. Would there be some kind of data that would point to be like, well, even though you're 100% keto and everything's working out great, something you ate here is not jiving with you? And is it possible to use that data
It
for that
can
reason?
be.
Or
It
something
can
similar
be.
to it?
So this is usually pretty interpersonal as well. So some people will see responses in their glucose and some won't at all. And I think it really depends on whether it's initiating that inflammatory response or not. So if it's kind of causing that stressor on your body or causing that immune response, then that can definitely show up in your glucose, especially for protein foods like that, because we don't especially expect them to cause a glucose rise. So if we're seeing that rise in glucose, it definitely is possible you have a sensitivity to, egg yolks or whatever it is. Usually egg whites with eggs, but that's really individual. So a lot of times people will say that they have a symptom, but their glucose doesn't move at all. And then sometimes people won't know that they have an issue with the food, but their glucose is telling. So it really depends, and it depends on the type of food. Essentially, if you are having you feel a response, either, sometimes people will have like a histamine response and they'll have itchiness or they'll have hives. We'll ask them to log that as a note within the app so that we can kind of track their glucose in coordination with that as well. So that's interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, that's crazy.
Cool. Well, trying to make sure that there's no other questions that need to be answered for anyone that's curious and to get into this. For those that are listening to this on audio, we are showing this in video on our YouTube channel, and I will throughout this conversation actually take some snapshots of my charts to give you some examples of what the app looks like and things like that, so you can kind of see kind of in action what the results of the CGM actually looks like inside the application and all of that, and so that you can kind of know what to expect visually. So check out the video on the YouTube channel if you're listening to the audio version of this. If not, just check out the social media for nutrisense because they'll have all sorts of different good stuff there, including, I'm sure, visual examples of what it's doing, what it's looking like, and things like that. Do you have a YouTube channel? I feel like you do.
We do. We aren't as active on it, but we do just for some, application videos and things like that. So definitely can follow us there, but I would say probably Facebook, Instagram is the best way to get more information.
Very cool. Yeah, I think what I was remembering, is that's where you have this is how you actually inject or insert your sensor
Yes.
video, and so yeah, you see the. In fact, you look familiar. Were you the one that filmed that video, or I don't?
I did film one video. I'm not sure if I'm on there, but I could very well be inserting my CGM and scanning it. So it is possible.
Yeah, very good. Well, it's been really great to nerd out over all of this stuff and get to really dive into a lot of this. And I think this I align very closely with what nutrisense is doing, proactive, and I think we all Keto Man's Club in general. We want guys to take the initiative to get in front of it to find out, and so I think that we're all we're all in alignment with all of that, and wanting to provide information and tools that will help men and women. There's some women out there listening, but our target audience is men. I won't lie, but
it's in the title.
It is. It's in the title. Get this information in their hands and really give them a tool that will be helpful and in the long run. I think that's a really powerful thing.
100%. I think that just knowing that you have the power to make changes early on that can benefit you throughout your entire life, and it doesn't even hurt, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's really powerful and can change the world. So
yeah, absolutely. Hopefully those CGM prices will drop, and you guys, because I know that you don't want to charge what you charge because it's not about making money. You got to pay your bills, I'm sure, but everything that I've gathered from interacting with the staff at nutrisense through whether it be support or working with Molly or communicating with you has been very much that we're on a mission. We want to get out there. We want to do this thing, and yeah, we absolutely want to drop this price if we can, because $250 a month is That's a
Right.
chunk. I had to convince my wife that it was, that was going to be doable.
Yeah, 100%. I think the more demand for CGMs, hopefully the lower they'll cost, right? Because they know that more people are benefiting from this. So we're hoping that we can pass those savings on to all of our users when the prices come down and the technology is not as new.
Yep, absolutely. Very good. Well, let's wrap this up and get you off with, for the rest of your night. Second reminder to our listeners: we appreciate you guys following and listening and watching. If you're listening, check out our YouTube, subscribe. We are going to be doing more and more of these videos, and I try to edit these down and make them really valuable, not just in the conversation and being able to put a face with a name, but also to be able to have some visuals, like, with my data from my continuous glucose monitor and things like that. So you can find all of our links to our social media at theketomansclub.com. You can also reach us via email, ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call or text 512-518-6161. We really appreciate it. If you are listening or watching this and think that this is something that a friend or family member might be able to use to carry them forward, please put this in their hands. Send them a link. It just takes a few moments, and this might. I haven't used it in a while. I'm proud of myself. I haven't, but I've used often during this closing period that oftentimes for most of us, all we need is a pebble. That pebble that starts the avalanche that helps us go towards our health journey. And this episode might be that final pebble that they needed to push them over the edge to start the avalanche, to actually help them towards optimal health and really reaching their goals and being the best version of themselves that they can be, just like we say in our podcast intro. So do that for us. Thank you again, Carlee, for joining us. Very much our pleasure to have you here. You're absolutely, we knew you would be, but you were absolutely proving to be a wealth of information, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It was fun.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear it. Well, until next week, make sure to eat meat, lift heavy, sleep, and repeat.